Whew. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm Will Anderson, and I'm here to talk about OK Go's new animated music video. It's called Impulse Purchase. I am one of the co-directors. I would introduce myself in an alternative reality that is not this one. I did, and it took too long, so I'm just going to run through my show reel at 1,000 times the speed. So you've met me now. I did a talk, yeah. I did a talk here last year. If you want to know more about me, you can watch it on YouTube. I won't introduce myself, but I will introduce this man. This is Lucas Zanotto. He's a wonderful designer, animator, artist, known for his amazing looping content, his amazing visual art. He does so much stuff for clients, lots of work. He does massive installations all over the world. He's just a great guy. I met him a good few years ago back at Pictoplasma in Berlin, and you know, when I met him, I was so into his work, and I wondered, oh, it would be great to make his stuff in something like geometry nodes, because it turns out he doesn't use a certain software that we all love so much. Maxon. Unacceptable in my eyes. So he got in touch and he was like, why, well, there's this video, it's for a big band, and I'm liking your work that you're doing that's more interactive. Maybe we could work together, and of course we can. Of course we can, Lucas. We're teamed up and we're going to make it work, but there was a missing ingredient, and that, of course, is Blender Studio. I couldn't believe it. I talked to Francesco, who I met at this event last year, and we got it all together, and we had this superhero team to make a really cool video together. So super fun. Let's go. But to start, Lucas was very into the work of the amazing Carl Sims. I don't know if you've seen his work before, but he did amazing work in the idea of artificial evolution, simulating these simple geometric forms and giving them a set of rules for growth, movement, mutation, allowing this kind of surprising behavior to emerge. And it's just kind of, we were just kind of blown away by this. We thought it was sort of mesmerizing. For 1994, it's just such a cool thing. And it's, you know, the song itself is kind of meta. It's written by OK Go. It's about, it's singing to the future after the singularity event, to the scions that control our music tastes, and it's to tell the algorithms to favor that song. It's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek kind of idea. It's a really interesting idea for a song, I think. So maybe we could make it look a little like this in some way, using Lucas's sort of simple design language. Probably got time for a quick clip. I like this clip. I want to show this clip.
Sometimes these evolving creatures would think of solutions to their goal which were completely different than I expected. In this one example, the creatures got taller and taller and taller and would simply fall over. Instead of figuring out some clever way of walking, they would fall to generate horizontal velocity. What I was telling them to do was to just move, and falling was a perfectly good solution as far as they're concerned. So this creature specialized in falling for as long as it possibly could, including doing a complete somersault.
I love that. It's so cool. It seems like the computer is sort of pretty creative in its own right. But like, as artists, we're more predictable, and we just jump into things without really thinking about it. And, you know, what are we getting ourselves into? You just have to play, you have to jump. So we did that. This was our first import into Blender. Lucas has his own process for how he makes his work, which is magical and mysterious, and I don't really understand exactly how he does it, and I don't really want to know, to be honest. But hang on a minute, you were trying to make it procedurally, right? So we need to back up a little bit and make a list of goals. First, the character should change. It should be able to change dynamically. That's super important. So geometry nodes sounds about right for that, right? I've done a lot of face tracking, kind of puppeteering work in my own sort of R&D spare time. So we want this character to be able to sing and look around and be aware of itself and surroundings. It should run in real time. And I love the idea that it's just one blend file. That's neat, right? Sounds like Eevee. I don't think I've really ever opened cycles before. I'm a Eevee maximalist. So this was perfect. This was a perfect excuse for me. And a big one, I guess, that was more complicated than I thought it would be was the camera needs to be able to adjust automatically if all these parameters are changing. That felt very important. But above all, this should be an open source project, something that people can download, play with, manipulate, and really make their own. And that really reflects, I think, the ethos of the Blender project. And the super cool thing about that, and everyone involved in this, is that everyone was aligned in that idea, which I think is a great, unusual thing. If you haven't already guessed, OK Go, Aura, they're a cool band. And I think more bands should do that, make the files downloadable and remix them. I just think that's super exciting as an idea. Anyway, so started the collaboration. This project really is all about kind of collab. Because Lucas wasn't working directly in Blender, we were having a lot of conversations. I was the one building these things, and we really tried to do it all in geometry nodes. So he gave me this great example of his characters like a cube. If you bevel it, it's a sphere. If you give the profile more than 4 sides, you've got a cylinder. And if you bevel that again and pull it out, it's a capsule. And those are all the shapes that we really need for this video. So I love that as a simple sort of breaking it down to just simple shapes and trying to build it in a completely procedural way. I would find ways to, so this is just a curve really with a profile, and then when you use the bevel modifier and you set that to a bevel weight edge, and then you store a named attribute in geometry nodes, you can then start beveling with it. The normals would break a little bit, but again, I'm an artist, so I didn't really mind too much. I just capped it and kind of got it working the way I needed it to work. There was also a nice rig physics setup that I sort of took from an amazing artist called Cartesian Caramel, who has this setup on his Gumroad. It's very cool. I adapted it slightly, and then we got these kind of dynamic moving limbs that we could later instance on the body, which was very cool. Next up, his work, Lucas's work's always kind of rolling. So I was looking on YouTube for how people did that. There's a bunch of folk that have done it in different ways. Duncan Rudd has a great tutorial that I really liked. I don't know if Duncan's here. I met him last year. He's there. Hey, dude. Good tutorial. Really useful. And used that. It was a flat surface for working out how this character would trundle on his way. So this was kind of really great because the shape and the orientation could change, and you could switch out different geometry, and it would all kind of be adaptive. So that was like a nice starting point for this runway. FYI, little Easter egg, there is a Suzanne in there. If you dig into the production files, you'll find a little. I had to do it for the Blender community. After that, a lot of trial and error, I'll be honest. I'm very enthusiastic about Blender and geometry nodes, but it's a lot of trial and error for me, just working out how to build everything essentially in one tree, if possible, with the help of sample near surface nodes and setting things and finding the tops of bounding boxes and things like that. I think someone who's really expert could do this very quickly, but I think part of it for me was more exploring it and working out as I went along. Trying to build it all so that it would all kind of live in one tree was pretty exciting to me. Everything was kind of built that way. So the mouth is just a grid, just a 2x2 grid, really, given a profile. This was another example of how important kind of the collaboration was, because I'm used to doing, for ARKit, which is the way that we capture live, motion capture with our phones on iPhones or Androids or whatever, there's a lot of shapes. There's 52 of them. And I would often overdo it, and then Lucas would be like, let's just break it down into like 3 simple things. That's horizontal distribution, vertical, and if you extrude it, you've kind of got your W's and Q's, and that's kind of all we needed. So like this was an example really of like, this is an earlier sort of test that I was just messing about with more of the final sort of thing. And actually, this is really like less is more, like just think about the graphic language and you don't have to break your back trying to make too many shapes to make this all work. That was like a nice little learning curve for me, I think. Do less is more, The basic kind of setup, just in case this is what I do. I ramble, and then I go back and recap and try to make it much clearer what I'm trying to explain. This is the first example of that. You take the data in. Right now, we're using Live Link Face because it's free. And what I tend to do is I bring it into one mesh that's just a sort of dummy mesh, and it has all of the named blend shapes on it. And this isn't for any visual reason. This is just to get the data in. I've made a simple shape key name generator that's on my Gumroad, which is free to download. It's just it doesn't make the keys themselves. Well, it doesn't make any moving keys. It just names them, and that's the only data that we really need in there. So click one button, you've got that in there. Then it's so simple. You just have that data, and then you just drive the group input properties of the geometry node setup. In this case, it's the mouth vertical distribution. Then we could be creative with it and add, maybe some head extrusion and very, very simple scripted expressions alongside it. So things like adding things together, subtracting them, multiplying them, amplifying them by 2 or 3. It's just play, really, and very, very simple. So that's kind of the pipeline for getting this data in and out. This is just some of my limb work, and then instancing it onto the body. This was before we got the color palette kind of worked out. But I got kind of, into this process and kind of a bit lost in it and just kept building and changing things and tweaking things like you do when you kind of get into procedural workflows. But Lucas was very good at bringing it back down to earth and being like, right, we need to calculate some very simple things here. The song's in 4/4, it's 110 BPM, and lucky for us, the beats per minute don't change at all throughout the song. And the project is going to be 30 frames per second. So I think it was Lucas that kind of worked this out. You just kind of need to take that 60 seconds in a minute, times it by 30, and you get this number, 1800. And then if we divide that by the BPM, we get this very funky number, 16.363636. And that's the frames per beat. So dum is 16 frames. Okay, if we times that by 4, we get another funky number, 65.45. Let's round it up to 65.5. And that's that's an important number that we're going to need later. And we worked out if we times that again by 2, we get a nice, satisfying loop that we're quite happy with. He's quite into he's an animator too, so he's into his graphs. So he liked the feeling of the graph editor with this 131 frames, and then we just offset those 5 keyframes with a cycles modifier set to offset, and we literally have him looping the entire video, which is easy, right? 5 frames, like bang, Bob's your uncle. This was the camera rig that used a lot of vector math nodes. This camera's going to need to follow this character. That should be easy, right? Kind of wrong. I was wrong about that. I was looking at this amazing tutorial by Erin Dale about controlling geometry nodes using vertex parenting. And it's a very simple trick, I guess, that you make an object and you merge it down into a single vertex, and then you can parent things to that vertex. And, well, why not parent a camera to that vertex? And then you can make those moves and you can track changes in geometry nodes, which is very exciting and probably powerful. And plus the power of simulation nodes now, you can sort of maybe ease into those positions and make that a variable. His tutorial is great, and it sets up a target also. And then there's a track 2 constraint that will follow that target. Very cool. For our thing, though, like, we don't really need a variable target as such. It's the character is in one position at the beginning anyway, and we're going to track that position. So we just need to be pointing at that character. That's why we thought about using just vector math nodes that switch away from that point and then track to it, using the help of the index switch menu node. So we literally switch the camera positions with an index switch. So we have left, right, up, down, bird's eye view, universe eye view, all these different views, easy peasy. So like, this was great. It was just a really dynamic way to be able to switch this camera kind of dynamically. But we have a problem. I had a problem where I was putting a bounding box around this shape and moving it through space, and we have this issue with the camera where it sort of isn't smooth and linear. And Lucas's work is wonderfully smooth and linear. He's great with camera control, and characters might be going through some serious stuff, and they might not be moving in a linear fashion. They often aren't. But we want the camera to be moving in ones, and very, very smoothly. So we kind of need to work out the distance per frame, and it was very frustrating for me because I'm not smart enough. I was so close. We can add radiuses and stretches, and we can get the vertical displacement, and we can add that to the distance per frame. But I was getting very confused with the sort of the rotation of this character and how on earth we calculate that. Bring in this guy, Simon. He helped. He's a genius. Thanks, Simon. Sorry, I didn't tell you. I knew we were having to do a talk, so sorry about that. Simon worked out a very clever solution, which was basically, it's a little like the rolling setup, I think, in that you just flatten your object in one axis. You delete the face, you convert it to a curve, and then you work out the curve length with the curve length node, and then you have the dynamic shape that if you unravel that circumference, you're going to have the distance, and that will always sort of update. And because our character, we're calculating it from the body, that's kind of all we needed really, was that circumference. I probably butchered that, Simon, sorry. But yeah, now we just need to track a single point in space. So we just add a point, and then we divide it by that special number, that 65.5 that we worked out, and then we have this point moving linear in space. And then my life just changed when this was fixed, that we could move the camera and change this character dynamically, and then everything would just kind of work, and everything would hold together. It's so exciting seeing the scene changing around this character and everything being Loctite. Very, very exciting. So again, what I do, I ramble, and then I talk it through nice and slow again. Recap here, we start with our object. It's trying to do it all in one crazy geometry nose tree, and that's just one object. We then instance that object onto a new bit of geometry that's merged down to a single point, and then we convert that to, we convert everything before that to an instance. So everything is an instance, the character is an instance, these planks are an instance, and the point is an instance. And then we just delete the instances we don't need. So we're deleting indexes 1 and 2 here, which is character and planks, and then we just have this point moving in space, which we can then put a bounding box around and then parent the camera to it. And then we have this setup that works, that when you move away from that point, and we have a track 2 on the camera pointing back at it, we have these different camera positions. So now we can switch, and we have all this control, which is super, super exciting and super satisfying in my mind. This is from the production. There's a little demo file on the Blender Studio website where you can download this. Every time you open it, it's different. This guy looks like Pepe the Frog. That's why I captured it. You can play with this and unpack it. There's quite a lot of things going on in this in this production file that's just really cool to unpack. Simon helped with a load of other things as well, the warping of paths, the procedural textures, the movement of the planks, the bubbles. He fixed a lot of things. I really liked how sometimes when you're trying to come up with a creative problem, to solve a creative problem, you often overcomplicate things, but like there was this wonderful thing where you would just merge and like warp the path, and it would give the impression that this character is on a journey that's grander than a linear one. But the character isn't actually moving, it's always in that center point. It's just this impression that the world around it is changing, which is just super cool. And I just loved that, Simon, that was very cool. Everything was made in GeoNodes, in that like even the bubbles, I think, well, Lucas wrote them by hand, and then we found out a little way to bring them in as images as planes, and then subdivide them, and then set up attributes for the different colors. But yeah, we were the real kind of, well, I could call it a constraint, is trying to just do everything as much as possible in geometry nodes for this, which is just super fun. Simon even made a little visualizer for how the bubbles can be positioned and then triggered so that they would come out of the right side of the mouth, and loads of things. There's lots going on, so please look into the file and download it and let us know what you think, and remix it, and that's what it's all about. There's just so many things here that we can get lost in, which is super fun. As I said, the file is on Blender Studio website. We made a add-on called FOSCAP, which is just the OSC receiver, so that you can plug in your phone and quickly get your IP address, and it'll match the ports, and then you can just become this character. You can sing along, you can change the cameras, and you can kind of remix it. So very, very cool thing. Yeah, the videos kind of went down quite nicely, I think. We've got loads of kind of making of stuff that's been coming out, lots of nice reactions. I'm just going to quickly end on my favorite comment that's on YouTube. This was my favorite. It's, my kiddo asked to listen to the song with a hot dog with eyes and a mouth walking on a clumped up piece of cheese. It took us an hour to figure out that they meant this song. We love y'all. Quite like that. I raced through that, but yeah, that's the very fast roundup of this very exciting 3-month project that was all about collaboration. But yeah, thank you for hearing me out. Cheers. I don't have very long, I don't think, but if there's any questions, hit me up, or if you want to chat after. But yeah, I don't know what the schedule is like, but yeah, chat to me after. Thanks for everything. Cheers.